Jamal heard the footsteps behind him, quick and closing in fast as he neared his front gate. Griffin, Wyatt, and Chad were there, stepping off the curb without a word, the same cruel confidence written across their faces. Jamal didn't run. He stood his ground. Griffin moved first, his fist already rising, and the others followed. Jamal hit the ground hard, but then something shifted. The dog didn't make a sound. One moment, Jamal laid alone. The next, it was there, massive, unmoving, eyes fixed only on the boys. What followed was overfast. The bullies thought that Jamal was an easy target, but they were about to learn just how wrong they were. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe. The hallway smelled like sweat and floor wax, the kind that clung to your clothes long after you left. Jamal moved quietly between the rows of lockers, keeping his shoulders slightly hunched and his eyes down, not because he was afraid, at least not in the way people thought, but because there was no point in inviting trouble. Trouble already knew his name. He turned the corner near the science wing and didn't even have time to react before his shoulder caught the hard shove. The books in his arms scattered across the floor, papers fluttering down like leaves in the wind. "Damn, my bad," Griffin said, dragging the words out slow, like he was performing for a crowd. "Didn't see you there." Jamal didn't look at him. He didn't have to. The voice alone brought heat to his face. Griffin Radford, tall, smug, loud when he wanted to be, quiet when he needed to hurt you in peace, stood over him in his red and white varsity jacket like he owned the school. He didn't laugh when he pushed you. He grinned, like it was a game, like you were the only one who didn't know the rules. Wyatt and Chad came around behind him, the usual formation, one to his left, one to his right, already chuckling like they'd rehearsed this. Wyatt crouched down slowly, picking up one of Jamal's notebooks and flipping it open with mock curiosity. "Got sketches in here," he said, flipping through pages with exaggerated care. "A little artist, huh?" Chad leaned closer to look, smirking. "You drawing us now, Jamal? That what this is? Maybe next time don't stare so hard in class if you don't want us thinking you're crushing." A few students slowed as they passed, heads turning briefly before snapping forward again, like they hadn't seen a thing. No one stopped. No one ever did. That was something Jamal had learned early on. It wasn't that they didn't know, it's that they didn't care to. Griffin tilted his head, watching Jamal with that same look he always gave, like he was checking for cracks. Jamal had never given him the satisfaction. He didn't flinch, didn't talk, didn't even breathe different when they were around. He just picked up his things, kept moving, kept his head low. But Griffin stepped forward now, real close, close enough that Jamal could feel the warmth of his breath, and leaned in like he had something personal to say. "You ever think about how quiet it is when you're not around?" he asked, the corners of his mouth twitching. "Like the air's just easier to breathe without you here." Wyatt dropped the notebook with a soft slap against the floor. "He's got nothing to say, man. He never does." Chad nudged one of Jamal's folders with his foot, sliding it just out of reach. "Probably thinks we'll leave him alone if he keeps pretending he's invisible." A classroom door opened up ahead, and Mr. Kerner stepped into the hallway, clipboard in hand. He looked down the corridor, paused as his eyes landed on the cluster of boys, then walked the other way without a word. Didn't say a thing. Didn't ask if anything was wrong. Just turned and kept moving. Jamal stood up slowly, arms full of wrinkled folders, his face unreadable. He didn't glance at Griffin, didn't look at Wyatt or Chad. He knew that was what they wanted. Acknowledgement, a reaction, something to prove they'd gotten to him. He gave them nothing. Griffin looked him up and down one last time before backing away. "You're lucky we're in school," he muttered. "Out there, things work different." They left just as the bell rang again. Students surged around him, conversations picked up, lockers slammed, and the building came back to life. No one looked at Jamal. No one asked if he was okay. He gathered the last of his things and walked to class, slipping into his seat near the window just before the late bell rang. He sat with his hands folded on top of his notebook, his eyes on the sky outside. The clouds moved slow, dragging across the blue like they were in no rush at all. He didn't look at anyone around him, didn't shift when someone snickered behind him, didn't react when his name was whispered by a voice 2 rows back. He just sat, quiet and steady, because he'd learned how to carry silence like armor. And even though no one else in that building could see it, he knew something was coming. He could feel it building with each passing day, pressing down on his shoulders like a weight the school refused to admit existed. And when the day came that they finally crossed the wrong line, he wouldn't be the one caught off guard. The final bell had long since rung, but Jamal didn't rush. He never did. He waited until the halls thinned out, until the clatter of lockers quieted and the echo of laughter drifted further down the building. Most days, he pretended he was just slow, just tired. But the truth was simpler. He didn't want to walk out with them. Not when he knew what waited outside, not when he could already feel their eyes before he even reached the sidewalk. He stepped through the side doors and into the dull afternoon sun. The sky was overcast, heavy with low-hanging clouds that hadn't quite made up their mind about whether to rain. The breeze stirred the leaves along the curb, carrying with it the sounds of distant cars and the soft rustle of distant footsteps. He adjusted the strap on his backpack and started the long walk home, his sneakers scuffing lightly against the sidewalk as he moved. No one walked beside him. There never was anyone. He kept to the edge of the road, away from the benches and the corners where other students gathered in noisy clusters. His route wound through the quiet side streets behind the school, past the run-down tennis courts and the overgrown practice fields no one used anymore. It was longer this way, but quieter, and that mattered more. As he walked, he let his thoughts unravel in silence. The words they'd said today weren't new. Nothing they said ever was. The same jabs, the same smirks, the same way Griffin always stood a little too close, like he needed to remind Jamal where the line was and who was in control of it. They don't even try to hide it, he muttered to himself, not loud, just enough to break the weight of his own silence. It's not about jokes. They're not joking. Not really. He stepped over a cracked bit of pavement where tree roots had lifted the sidewalk, his eyes on the uneven ground, his mouth drawn tight. They want to see if they can make me break. That's what this is. The weight in his chest felt familiar now. Not anger, not exactly. It was something heavier, something more permanent, a quiet pressure that sat behind his ribs and didn't go away, no matter how many times he tried to push it down. He passed the old corner store with the boarded-up windows, the one that used to sell candy and frozen drinks back when he was little. Before it closed, he and his dad would stop there on the way home from the barber shop. Jamal would pick something sweet, and his dad would always pretend to be surprised at the price, fishing extra coins out of his pocket, with exaggerated grumbles. He hadn't thought about that in a while. "You ever gonna do something?" he asked himself quietly, the question sitting in the space between footsteps. Or just keep taking it like they want you to? He didn't answer. There wasn't one yet. The route took him past empty lawns and long driveways, houses with flags and lawn chairs and wind chimes that tinkled softly in the breeze. Most of the windows were shut, the yards too perfect, too still. He knew these streets too well, knew which houses had cameras, which ones always had a sheriff's car parked out front, which porches had old men sitting on them that looked just a little too long when he passed. He knew, too, that the closer he got to his block, the more the air shifted, not just in sound, but in feeling, something tighter, more watchful. He could always tell when someone was watching him, even when they weren't close enough to see. He crossed a narrow street and turned toward the small bridge that curved over the shallow creek near the edge of the woods. He always walked the middle, never too close to the trees on either side, where someone could wait just out of sight. He told himself it was habit, just part of the routine, but he knew that wasn't true. He didn't trust the quiet, not anymore. "They see me alone and think I'm easy," he murmured, slowing as he reached the center of the bridge. "Think I won't fight back." The breeze picked up again, brushing through the tall grass beside the path and sending a shiver down his spine that had nothing to do with the wind. He looked behind him once, then forward again. Nothing, just stillness. But still, he didn't relax. He wasn't scared, not in the way they probably hoped, but he wasn't stupid either. There were rules he had to live by that they'd never even have to think about, like which street to walk, which tone to use, when to speak, when to stay silent. He had learned them without being taught, and now he could feel something shifting. "They're not just messing around anymore," he said, barely above a whisper. "They're checking how far they can go." He reached the edge of the woods and turned onto his street, a narrow strip of cracked asphalt lined with faded fences and uneven lawns. His house sat near the end, tucked beneath a pair of old pine trees, quiet and sturdy like it had always been. The fence that wrapped around the backyard leaned slightly at the corner, the gate still loose from the last storm. He glanced up at the porch, half expecting his dad to be waiting there with a question in his eyes. But it was empty, just the soft creak of a wind chime and the distant sound of a dog barking somewhere farther down the block. He reached for the gate and paused, his hand resting on the latch. "They don't know yet," he said, his voice steady now. "They think I'm alone. They don't know what's waiting." He had just stepped through the gate when the sound of footsteps behind him made him freeze. Not fast, not panicked, just slow, confident, too familiar to be anything but intentional. The kind of footsteps that came from people who believed they owned the ground they walked on, even when it wasn't theirs. Then came the voice. Jamal. He didn't move at first. His hand stayed on the gate latch, the wood creaking slightly beneath his grip, and his eyes remained fixed on the porch just ahead. But something in the air shifted, something tight and sour, so he turned slowly and looked back. Griffin stood in the street like he'd been waiting to be noticed, hands in his jacket pockets, his grin wide and unbothered. Wyatt and Chad flanked him, all three of them standing like they'd just stumbled across something worth laughing at. "So this is it," Griffin said, eyes roaming lazily over the yard. "Didn't expect much, but damn. You really living out here like this?" Jamal didn't say anything. He just watched them, his posture still, the kind of stillness that came right before a door slammed or something cracked. Wyatt nudged Chad, then pointed at the side of the house. "You see that busted-down fence? I told y'all it'd look like this. Man lives in a shoebox with weeds in the front." Chad scoffed. "2 bikes, both rusted out. And what's that? A tarp over the porch? Nah, that's a whole documentary." Griffin shook his head, pacing a little closer now. "We had a bet," he said. "Wanted to see what the mystery man's hideout looked like. You know, since you never talk. Since you always walk home like you got something to hide. And turns out, this is it. Makes sense. Quiet house for a quiet nobody." Jamal stepped back onto the sidewalk without hesitation, the gate swinging wide behind him. "You follow me all the way here just to talk about paint and bikes?" he said, voice sharp, eyes narrowed. "You could have just failed another math quiz if you wanted to waste time." Wyatt grinned. "You getting brave now?" "I'm getting tired," Jamal snapped. "Tired of being followed. Tired of y'all pretending this is funny. You think showing up at my house makes you tough?" Griffin laughed once, short and cold. "Nah, man, you don't get it. We're not here to joke." "Good," Jamal said, taking a step forward, face steady. "'Cause I'm not in the mood to laugh." The air shifted again, heavier this time. Chad's smile slipped. Wyatt stopped laughing, and Griffin's face, for the first time, went still. "You really sure you want to talk like that?" Griffin asked. "Out here? Alone?" Jamal nodded. "Dead sure." Griffin stepped forward, slow and casual, but there was tension in his jaw now. "Maybe you don't understand what kind of mistake you're making." "No," Jamal said. "I think you're the one who doesn't get it. You've been pushing and laughing and thinking this'll stay one-sided forever. But it won't. You don't own me. And you don't scare me." Chad shifted his stance. "Sounds like he's asking for it." Griffin's voice dropped low. We gave you chances to keep your mouth shut, and now you're acting bold. You forgot where you are? Jamal didn't back up. You followed me home. That tells me everything I need to know. Y'all don't have power. You're just desperate. That did it. Griffin lunged first, shoving Jamal hard in the chest. The impact sent him stumbling back into the fence, the wood rattling under his weight. Before he could catch his breath, Wyatt stepped in and swung, a fist catching the side of his head, sending a flash of heat through his skull. Jamal dropped his bag, arms coming up to protect his face, but Chad was already beside him, throwing a punch that sank into his ribs and folded him forward. He tried to move, tried to get his footing, but Griffin grabbed his collar and slammed him down to the ground. Gravel scraped against his arms, his breath caught in his throat, and the world spun for a second. "Not so tough now, huh?" Griffin hissed, kneeling over him. "Where's that mouth now?" Wyatt kicked him once in the side, not hard enough to break anything, but hard enough to send a clear message. Chad crouched nearby, laughing under his breath, watching Jamal curl slightly inward, and somewhere, beneath the pounding in his ears and the ache spreading through his side, Jamal could hear it, something else, a sound he knew, not a shout, not a siren, a low, rising growl. His eyes opened wide, and he turned his head just enough to see the corner of the yard where the fence had started to shift, and that's when he heard the crack. Wood splitting, heavy paws landing, and all three of them hadn't noticed yet. Jamal's fingers curled against the dirt. As Griffin's weight pressed into his chest, he could taste blood at the corner of his mouth, warm and bitter, the metallic sting growing sharper with each hit. His arms burned from blocking, from trying to twist free, but there were too many of them. Griffin's fist slammed down again, cracking against his shoulder, and the pain pulsed down to his ribs like a wave. "Not so smart now, huh?" Griffin spat, leaning in close, voice full of breath and sweat and hate. "Where's all that talk now?" Wyatt circled behind him, crouched low and ready, his knuckles red, his grin too wide. "He don't got nothing left to say." Chad laughed as he stepped forward and swung his boot toward Jamal's side, catching his hip hard enough to knock the wind from his lungs. Jamal let out a ragged breath, his hands grabbing blindly at gravel, his legs twisting underneath him as he tried to push up. But Griffin shoved him down again and kept him there. "Thought you were better than us, huh?" Griffin growled. "Thought just 'cause you kept your mouth shut, you had power? Nah, you ain't got nothing. You're dirt under our shoes." The words didn't hurt, not like the fists, not like the knee driving into his stomach, but something in Jamal snapped. The silence, the way no one could hear him, the way no one ever listened, it broke, and through clenched teeth and bloody lips, he screamed, "Diesel!" It wasn't a cry for help. It was a command, a single shout that ripped through the air louder than anything they'd said. Griffin's hand froze mid-swing. Wyatt's head turned. Chad stepped back, confused. Then came the sound, low, deep, and rumbling from the yard behind them, a growl so raw it made the back of Jamal's neck prickle. They turned just as the fence gave way. Wood split, boards snapped, and the air filled with the heavy thud of muscle and rage hitting the ground. The dog didn't bark at first. He didn't snarl or lunge blindly. He moved with purpose, paws pounding the dirt, as he tore across the yard and straight through the open gate. Diesel. He was massive. Dark-coated, eyes locked on Jamal like nothing else in the world mattered. His body was low, fast, all lean strength and momentum. The second he saw the three boys, he didn't pause. Griffin scrambled back, eyes wide. "What the—" But Diesel was already on him. The cane Corso slammed into Griffin's side, knocking him off Jamal like he weighed nothing. Griffin hit the ground with a scream, arms flailing, his voice cracking in shock as Diesel stood over him, teeth bared, chest heaving. "Get him off!" Griffin shrieked, arms up to shield his face. But Diesel didn't bite. Not yet. He just growled, deep and steady, lips pulled back far enough to show every inch of what could happen. Wyatt tried to grab a stick from the ground, but Jamal was already back on his feet, wobbling, blood running from his nose. He lunged forward and shoved Wyatt hard, the momentum sending them both tumbling, fists swinging wild. Wyatt hit the ground with a yelp, and Jamal's fist found his face once, twice, until Wyatt squirmed out and kicked backward to break free. Chad grabbed Jamal by the shirt and pulled him off, throwing him against the fence. But as he charged again, Diesel turned, eyes flashing, and launched toward him. Chad froze, his hands up, backing away fast. "I didn't touch him! I didn't—" Diesel didn't care. He lunged at Chad's legs, snapping his jaws inches from his calf, and Chad screamed, stumbling as he backed toward the street. "Stop! Get it away from me!" Griffin scrambled up and made a break for the sidewalk, tripping once before catching himself, limping as he dragged himself toward the curb. Jamal didn't move. He stood in the center of the yard, breathing hard, his shirt torn, bruises forming along his arms and ribs, but his eyes were locked on Diesel, watching as his dog circled the boys like a lion warning off hyenas. "Diesel!" Jamal shouted again, his voice hoarse but firm. "Enough!" The dog slowed, his growl fading, but his stance still tense, his eyes never leaving the boys. Griffin coughed, then spat, his hands shaking as he backed farther down the street. "This ain't over," he rasped. "You hear me? This ain't over." Wyatt was limping. Chad didn't speak. All three of them were bruised, rattled, breathless, and suddenly not laughing. Jamal didn't speak either. He stood tall in the middle of the yard as Diesel returned to his side, his body still tense, his head low, eyes trained on the street. The boys disappeared down the road, fading into the distance, and Jamal, chest rising and falling, didn't move until the last one was out of sight. Only then did he let his hand drop onto Diesel's head, fingers sinking into the thick fur behind his neck. "You waited," he whispered. "You knew." Diesel didn't bark, didn't move, just stood beside him, breathing calm, steady, ready. And Jamal knew right then. This wasn't just a dog, this was family. Jamal stood there for a long time, one hand still resting on Diesel's back, as the wind moved quietly through the broken slats of the fence. The sun had started to dip behind the rooftops, the light softening to that late-day glow that made everything look a little older, a little heavier. His shirt clung to him with sweat and dust. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of holding it all in too long. He didn't speak. Diesel didn't move. They just stood together in the yard, watching the street where the boys had disappeared, as if part of them expected the sound of footsteps to return. But the silence stayed, stretching longer with each breath until it finally let them go. Only then did Jamal turn toward the house. The door creaked softly as he pushed it open and stepped inside. Diesel followed close behind, his paws heavy on the floorboards, his presence steady as ever. The house felt colder now, not from the temperature, but from the sudden contrast. Inside, the stillness was almost too clean, the kind of quiet that made bruises feel sharper and memories hit harder. Jamal dropped his bag in the same spot as always, near the side of the couch. But this time, he didn't sit. He just stood in the middle of the living room, breathing uneven. Blood still dried along the side of his face. The pain in his ribs was deep, aching with every inhale, but he didn't press on it, didn't need to. It wasn't the worst part. He heard the engine before he saw the headlights. His father's truck pulling into the drive, the rumble low and familiar. The door opened, shut, boots on gravel. Then the front door unlocked, and Robert Brown stepped into the room, wiping his hands with a rag that looked like it had seen a dozen oil changes. He didn't see Jamal at first. He was talking as he walked. "Gonna need a new belt for that Altima. Thing's been squealing for weeks. Told her last time, but no one listens until it snaps." He looked up mid-sentence. The rest of the words died on his lips. His eyes went straight to Jamal's face. He dropped the rag without a word. "Who did it?" he asked, his voice low and even. but there was a sharpness underneath, quiet, dangerous. Jamal didn't answer right away. His arms hung at his sides, his shoulders loose, not from peace, but exhaustion. His father took a step forward. "Jamal! Who put their hands on you?" Jamal's voice was hoarse when it finally came out. "Griffin. Wyatt. Chad." Robert's jaw tightened. "They followed you here?" Jamal nodded slowly. "Waited till I was in the yard. I heard them right before I opened the door. They'd been watching me. Said they made a bet about what the house looked like. Said they wanted to see where I live." Robert looked past him toward the back door. "They come through the gate?" "No. I went out to meet them," Jamal said. "I told them to leave. They started running their mouths. I didn't back down." He hesitated. "Then they jumped me." He saw something shift in his father's face. Just slightly, like a curtain being pulled back. "They all hit you?" "Yeah." Jamal exhaled hard through his nose. "They had me on the ground. I was losing. I couldn't keep them off me." Robert nodded once. His hands were still, but his eyes were not. They moved constantly now, checking Jamal's injuries, looking toward the hallway, then back at his son, like he was doing calculations in his head without speaking. "What stopped them?" he asked finally. Jamal glanced at Diesel, who had taken his usual spot by the couch, but was still alert, still watching the front door like he hadn't quite moved on from what happened. "I yelled," Jamal said. "Called him. He broke through the fence." Robert looked down at the dog. "He bite anyone?" "No. He hit Griffin hard, knocked him off me. Got in Chad's face, almost went for him, but he didn't hurt them. He just scared the hell out of them." Robert looked at Diesel for a long moment, then back at Jamal. "That dog saved you." Jamal nodded. "They'd still be here if he hadn't." His father stepped back and sat down on the edge of the armrest, running a hand down his face. The silence in the room wasn't comfortable. It was the kind that carried weight, the kind that made decisions happen, whether you said them out loud or not. "They're gonna come back," Jamal said, voice quieter now. "Next time, maybe with more. Maybe with cameras, maybe with lies. And if we go to the cops now, all they'll see is a big black dog and 3 white boys crying about how scared they were." Robert didn't argue. He'd grown up in this town. He knew exactly how that story would be told. He looked up at his son and didn't see a boy anymore. He saw something else, someone who had tried silence, had tried avoiding, had tried letting it pass. And now that it had followed him home, all that was gone. "Come with me," Robert said. Jamal followed him down the hall, through the kitchen and into the garage. The overhead light buzzed to life. Tools lined the wall. A heavy bag hung from a steel bracket on the ceiling, dusty but still firm. In the corner, a rolled mat, a pair of old gloves. Robert walked over, pulled them off the hook, turned and held them out. Jamal stared at them, then took them. His father said nothing more. He just stepped back, folded his arms, and waited. And Jamal tightened the straps. The first time Jamal threw a punch, it didn't land right. His knuckles glanced off the bag, his wrist bent too much, and the shock of the impact ran up his arm like a jolt of warning. His father didn't say anything at first. He just reached forward, turned Jamal's shoulder, adjusted his elbow, and pointed to the floor with one finger. Again, Jamal squared up, tried again. Still wrong. Again. His arms were sore after 10 minutes, his shirt clinging to his back by 20, and his breath felt like it came through a filter of concrete by the time the hour passed. But he didn't quit. His father didn't praise him either, but he nodded once when Jamal finally landed one right. "Good," he said. "Now the other hand." Every evening after that was the same. School, then home, then the garage, no TV, no distractions. Just sweat, breath, bruises, and focus. His body ached in places he didn't know could ache. His arms felt heavy by the second day. His ribs still lit up with pain whenever he twisted too hard. But it all faded into something else, something clearer. For the first time in weeks, the noise of everything outside didn't follow him in. Out there, people watched and whispered and walked away. In here, Every hit had a purpose. His father kept the instruction simple. Keep your chin down. Don't lean too far forward. Let the power come from the ground, not the shoulders. Don't swing wild. Breathe, always breathe. The gloves were old and too big at first, but the weight of them started to feel familiar, even comforting. And through it all, Diesel watched from his usual spot by the workbench, stretched out on the cool concrete floor. He didn't bark, didn't move, just kept his eyes on Jamal the whole time like he understood exactly what was happening. At school, things didn't go back to normal. They didn't escalate right away either, but something had changed. Jamal could feel it in the halls, see it in the way the boys watched him now, not just with arrogance, but calculation. They didn't laugh in his face anymore. They didn't knock his books down or shoulder him into lockers. But they didn't disappear either. Griffin's eyes found him in the cafeteria every day. Without fail, he never said a word, just stared from across the room like he was trying to figure something out, like he was waiting for a cue. Wyatt and Chad were quieter too, but always close, always circling. Jamal didn't let it shake him, not this time. He walked with his head up, took the same route home, sat in the same seat in class. He didn't try to provoke them, but he didn't hide anymore either. He let them know he saw them, and more importantly, that he wasn't looking away. The rumors started by the end of the week. Someone had seen the fight, or part of it. Someone had heard the dog barking and seen the three boys run. No one came out and said Jamal had won, but the story grew legs anyway. Whispers slipped through the halls like smoke under a closed door. People leaned in to hear pieces of it, added their own details, twisted the facts, and passed it on again. Most of the teachers didn't mention anything. One or two gave Jamal a longer look than usual, but no one pulled him aside. No one asked questions. He heard one kid mutter in gym class that Griffin got chased off like a punk. He heard another say, "That dog almost ripped someone's leg off." He didn't correct them. He didn't say anything at all. Because he knew that whatever they thought happened, the truth was worse. Not because of what Diesel had done, but because of what the boys were going to do now. Griffin didn't let things go. He didn't like being embarrassed. And he definitely didn't like being seen as weak. Jamal told his father about the silence, about the way the boys were waiting. His dad nodded, jaw set, but didn't offer false comfort. "They're regrouping," he said. "They thought they had the upper hand. That didn't work. So now they're thinking. That's when they're most dangerous." Jamal hit the bag harder that night. Not angry, just focused. He practiced slipping to the side, rolling under an invisible punch, resetting his feet fast. His timing got better. His punches sharper, his breathing steadier, but the ache didn't go away. Not from his ribs, not from the weight of waiting. Diesel started sleeping closer to the front door. Jamal didn't ask why. He didn't have to. The garage light hummed above them as Jamal pulled the gloves from his hands and set them down on the bench. His knuckles were sore, raw in a few places, and the muscles in his arms felt like they'd been stretched past their limit. The workout had drained his body, but it hadn't cleared his head. The pressure was still there, sitting behind his eyes, pressing in heavier with each passing day. Diesel lay stretched out on the floor nearby, watching with his ears perked, his body calm but ready. The stillness in the garage had become routine now. Sweat, breath, silence. But tonight, Jamal broke it first. "What happens if they call the cops?" he asked quietly, not looking up. Robert turned from the far wall where he'd been adjusting one of the bags of sand used to stabilize the heavy bag. He didn't ask what Jamal meant. He waited. "They know where I live," Jamal said. "They're not gonna let this go. You saw their faces after the dog came out. They were scared, but not enough to stop. If they can't win in the street, they'll try something else." Robert stepped closer, arms folded, his eyes narrowed but patient. "They might say he attacked them," Jamal continued, "that he bit one of them. Even if he didn't, they could lie, and if they tell the right person, if it gets back to the cops, they're not going to come here asking questions. They'll come with orders." Robert nodded once, slow and steady. "They'll try to take him," Jamal said, his voice shaking now. "And I don't know what I'm supposed to do if that happens." His father didn't answer right away. He walked over, leaned against the bench beside his son, and looked down at Diesel, who was now resting his head on his front paws. "I wasn't there that night," Robert said after a long pause. "I didn't see what happened, and that still eats at me." Jamal looked over at him but said nothing. "But I know you," his father continued. "I know that dog, and if you tell me they jumped you first, that Diesel didn't attack until you called him, that he didn't bite, then that's the truth. I don't need to see it to believe it." Jamal swallowed hard, his fingers tightening into fists. "And if they try to twist it, try to act like Diesel's some threat to the community just 'cause he scared the hell out of those boys?" Robert's voice dropped a little, low and firm. "Then they'll have to hear it from me, straight. Because I'm not letting them come here and paint you or this dog like you're criminals, not when we both know better." "But what if they come when you're not here?" Jamal asked, the words spilling fast, like he hadn't meant to say them, but couldn't hold them back anymore. "What if it's just me again? They show up with a van or some animal control guy, and I'm standing there with no one but Diesel. What am I supposed to do?" Robert didn't flinch. He just stepped forward and rested a hand on his son's shoulder. "They won't come when I'm not here," he said. "From now on, I'll be here. Every afternoon. Every evening. If they're watching, I'm watching too. I'll make sure they see I'm here." Jamal's voice dropped lower, barely above a whisper now. "What if they don't care?" His father's hand stayed firm. "Then they'll still have to go through me first." The words weren't loud. They weren't for show. But Jamal felt them settle in his chest like stone. He looked down at Diesel again. Calm, quiet, still watching. "I keep thinking about that night," he said. "I couldn't stop them. No matter how loud I talked or how hard I tried, they were going to keep going, and he was the only one who came." His father's voice was softer now. "That's what loyalty looks like. That dog knew. He waited. And he didn't come out swinging. He held back. He didn't hurt them. He scared them. That's more control than most people have." Jamal nodded slowly. He started, but didn't finish. He didn't need to. Robert looked him in the eye. "This isn't your burden alone, son. You've carried it long enough. Now, we carry it together." Outside, the night had deepened. The wind brushed against the side of the house, soft and cool, but the weight inside the garage hadn't moved. Jamal took a breath, long and full, and stood a little straighter. "All right," he said. Robert gave his shoulder one last squeeze, then stepped back. "We'll be ready for whatever comes next." And with that, they turned off the light and walked inside, leaving Diesel to rise and follow behind them, step for step, never more than a breath away. The sun dipped lower behind the rooftops as Jamal made his way down the final stretch toward home. The sky washed in fading gold and soft streaks of gray. His street was just ahead. The narrow bend that led past the chain-link fence and the patchy lawn that he and his father had tried to fix every spring. He could almost see the porch light, could almost hear Diesel pacing behind the gate like he did every evening. The tension in his shoulders had started to ease, not because he believed he was safe, but because the silence had lasted just a little too long. Days without a shove, a glare, a cruel joke whispered in the back of class. No Griffin, no Wyatt, no Chad. It wasn't peace. It was patience, and it was always temporary. His fingers tightened around his backpack strap as he stepped off the sidewalk to cut across the short gravel slope just before his house came into view. He had maybe 30 steps left. That's when the noise came. Quick footsteps on the gravel behind him. Fast. Close. He spun. Too late. A fist cracked into the side of his jaw, and the world snapped sideways. He dropped his bag, stumbled, caught himself, and was already swinging back. His arm connected hard with someone's ribs. Wyatt's, he thought, sending the boy staggering with a grunt. Jamal's heart pounded, not from fear, but from something sharper now, something hot and rising. The boys rushed him again. Griffin in front, Chad to the side, Wyatt circling back. And this time, Jamal didn't back up. He planted his feet and ducked the next swing. Griffin's punch flew wide. Jamal came up under it and caught him square in the chin with a tight left hook. The sound was dull but solid, and Griffin's head snapped back as he stumbled 2 steps. "You want it?" Jamal growled, breathing hard. "Come take it." Wyatt grabbed his shoulder from behind, but Jamal twisted out of it and threw an elbow that clipped Wyatt's cheek and sent him sprawling into the dirt. Chad lunged next, arms out, and Jamal dropped low, drove his shoulder into Chad's stomach, and slammed him into the side of the fence. The whole thing rattled on impact. Chad groaned and slid down, gasping. But Griffin recovered first. He rushed in and drove his knee into Jamal's ribs. The pain tore through his side like lightning. Jamal buckled, gasping, and that was all it took. Wyatt was back up, and the 3 of them swarmed him at once. A fist hit the back of his head. A foot struck the back of his leg. Jamal went down hard, hands catching gravel, knees scraping raw against the ground. They kicked, cursed. Griffin dropped on top of him, fists swinging wild, trying to get a clear shot through Jamal's arms. But Jamal fought. Even on the ground, even bloodied, even breathless. He fought. He rolled to the side, caught Griffin's wrist, and yanked it sideways with everything he had. Griffin yelped, pulled back, and Jamal kicked him off. He got halfway up before Wyatt tackled him again, the 2 of them crashing into the dirt. Jamal's elbow slammed into Wyatt's jaw, but this time it didn't slow them. He was outnumbered. The hits came faster now, sloppy, unfocused, but too many to block. A punch split the skin just above his eye. Another caught his shoulder. He dropped back to the ground, arms curling up, not in surrender, but survival. He could hear them now, laughing again. That ugly, breathless kind of laughter that came when they thought they were finally winning. Griffin crouched low beside him, face twisted with sweat and hate. "You got lucky last time," he spat. "Not today. No dog, no daddy. Just you." Jamal spat blood to the side, eyes narrowing through the pain. "I don't need luck," he muttered. "I just need a little more time." Griffin punched him again, hard. His vision flashed white for a moment, the sky above him spinning, but he still heard footsteps from the other end of the street. Heavy ones, fast, and though Jamal's head was ringing, he saw their eyes start to shift. One by one, their attention no longer on him, but on something approaching. He didn't need to turn to know what it was. They were almost there. He just had to hold on. Jamal's head throbbed with the dull weight of impact. His hands were scraped, raw with dirt and blood, but he refused to stay down. His breath came in short bursts, ragged and sharp, and every time he tried to push himself up, another blow came down to keep him there. Griffin's knee dug into his side while Wyatt circled with clenched fists, and Chad, panting, red-faced, stood nearby, eyes darting between the street and the house, like he was starting to realize this wasn't going to go as clean as they'd planned. Still, Jamal wouldn't stop. His hand shot up and caught Griffin's sleeve, yanking hard enough to pull him off balance. Griffin shouted and swung again, but Jamal ducked, rolled, and kicked at his leg, forcing him back just enough to get a breath in. Then Chad cursed under his breath. "What is that?" The others didn't hear him at first, but then Wyatt turned, eyes narrowing. "Someone's running!" Griffin stood halfway upright, about to speak, when the voice rang out across the block. "Hey!" It was sharp, clear, and moving fast. Jamal didn't need to see to know. The voice was too familiar. Strong, focused, clipped at the edges with fury he'd only ever heard once before. His father. Robert Brown was sprinting down the middle of the road, one arm pumping, the other held high, phone out, camera already rolling. He was shouting as he came, not just words, but names. "I got all of you! Keep hitting him! Keep going! Let the whole damn world see what you do when you think nobody's watching." Griffin's eyes went wide. Wyatt stepped back, stumbling. "Run!" Chad shouted, already bolting toward the corner, but it was too late. Behind Robert, bounding low and fast across the pavement like a force of nature, came Diesel. His paws thudding with rhythm, his ears back, eyes locked, breath pumping out in bursts as he cut the distance in seconds. "Don't you dare run now," Robert shouted again. "Keep your hands up. Come on, let's see how brave you are when somebody's filming." Griffin spun around and made for the yard, but Diesel was already veering left. The cane corso didn't bark. He didn't lunge blindly. He moved with purpose, cutting Griffin's path at the fence and forcing him to spin back the other way. Chad didn't even look. He just ran. Wyatt, caught between fear and confusion, hesitated too long. Jamal saw the moment happen, saw the indecision freeze Wyatt's legs. He pushed himself up on one arm and grabbed Wyatt by the ankle as he turned, yanking hard and sending him sprawling. Wyatt hit the ground with a grunt, flailing, trying to crawl away. But Diesel reached him first. He didn't bite. He didn't touch him. He stood over Wyatt's back, breathing heavy, his chest rising and falling, his growl low and deep like a warning held barely in check. Robert stopped beside Jamal, camera still raised, voice calm but hard now. "Get up, son." Jamal nodded, teeth clenched, pushing off the ground with trembling arms. "You all right?" "I'm good," Jamal said, even though everything in his body said otherwise. Robert turned the camera toward Griffin, who was backing up toward the corner, face pale, shirt twisted. "You three jumped my boy again," he said. "Followed him. Beat him. And now we got it. Every face. Every swing." Griffin tried to talk, to say something, but Robert cut him off with a sharp gesture. "No, you had your say. You had your fists. Now, the camera talks." Chad reappeared at the end of the block, frozen between running and turning back. But Diesel's growl stopped him in his tracks. "You call the police," Robert said. "You spin your little story again. Go ahead. But this time, I got the truth. This time, the story's ours." Jamal stood now, one arm over his ribs, blood trickling down his cheek, but his eyes were steady. "They wanted to make sure I couldn't walk home without looking over my shoulder," he said quietly. "Now they're the ones running." Robert nodded, the camera still rolling, his voice steady. "This ain't revenge," he said. "This is the start of accountability." Diesel held his ground, still watching Wyatt like he knew what kind of boy he was. Too soft to hit alone, too proud to admit fear, too stupid to think the truth would ever catch up. The sun was nearly gone now, the sky fading into soft purples and deepening blue. Porch lights flicked on one by one along the street, casting long shadows over the gravel and broken pavement. Robert finally lowered the camera. "You got all three?" Jamal asked. "Clear as day," his father replied. "Faces, words, blows, everything. Can't lie about what the whole world can see." Robert's face was carved from stone, his eyes flicking between the three boys now corralled in the center of the street, Diesel pacing around them like a silent threat. "You're not going anywhere," he said. "Not until someone else hears this." He reached into his jacket, pulled out his phone, and tapped the speaker button. 911. The voice on the line answered after a moment. "What's your emergency?" "My name is Robert Brown. I have 3 minors here who just assaulted my son outside our home. We have video footage of the entire event. One of them may need medical attention. They're currently being held in place without violence. I need officers dispatched immediately." The line stayed quiet for half a second too long. Then came the voice again. "We're sending a unit now, sir. Please remain on the line." Jamal didn't say anything. He just stood with his father, arms crossed tight against his aching ribs, eyes fixed on Griffin, who was no longer glaring, no longer smug, just silent. Wyatt shifted nervously. "You can't sick a dog on us," he muttered. "He didn't touch you," Robert said calmly. "And he won't, unless you try to run. Then we'll see what instinct does." Diesel stood still now, close enough that all 3 boys felt him watching, waiting. None of them moved. Griffin tried to muster something. "We didn't follow him. He probably started it." Robert raised the phone higher. You really want to say that? On camera? Griffin's mouth closed again. The dispatcher's voice came through the speaker. Sir, we have a unit en route. ETA 2 minutes. Please remain on the scene. And do not let the suspects leave. Robert smiled coldly. They're not going anywhere. The neighbors had started to peek out from behind curtains, one or two stepping onto porches, phones in hand. The silence in the street was tense now, filled with the weight of something shifting. Jamal could feel it, not just in his body, but in the air itself. The tide had turned. He turned toward his father, voice low. They're scared now. Robert gave a single nod. They should be. The flashing lights appeared first, red and blue bouncing off the houses as the cruiser rounded the bend. The moment the car came to a stop, 2 officers stepped out, hands on their belts, eyes moving fast. One of them spoke. What's going on here? Robert raised the phone. I've got video of my son being assaulted. 3 on 1. Right there in your camera. The officer looked at the boys, then at Diesel. Is the dog involved? He didn't bite, didn't touch them. He's trained. He did what any father or friend would have done. He stood between a child and a threat. The officers exchanged a glance, then approached the boys slowly. Hands where we can see 'em, one said. The boys obeyed. Jamal watched, breathing slow now, as they were questioned, checked for injuries, and told to sit on the curb. His father handed the phone over to the other officer. Full video, he said. Clear audio. Faces, fists, names. You'll see who started it. The officer nodded. You pressing charges? He asked. Robert looked at Jamal. Jamal nodded, without hesitation. Yes, Robert said. We are. The boys didn't protest. They couldn't, and for the first time in weeks, Jamal felt something deeper than relief. He felt control. The house was quiet again. The flashing lights had faded from the street, the officers were gone, and the 3 boys had been taken away. First to the cruiser, then to the station, escorted without handcuffs, but with enough silence to say more than words could. Jamal stood by the kitchen sink now, his hands resting on the edge of the counter, his shirt stained with dust and blood, his shoulders stiff, but his eyes clear. Robert leaned against the wall nearby, phone in hand. The recording saved in multiple places now, one copy backed up to a private drive, one emailed to himself, one sent to a lawyer friend he'd gone to high school with. Neither of them had spoken much since the officers left. Diesel lay on the mat near the door, ears flicking occasionally, but otherwise still, his breathing slow and even. It was Robert who finally broke the silence. You did good today, he said quietly. You held your ground. Jamal nodded once, his jaw still tight. Wasn't trying to win. Just didn't want to fold. Robert crossed the room and set his phone down on the table. He looked at his son for a long moment before pulling out a chair and sitting, his hands clasped together, resting on the edge of his knees. I was nervous, he admitted. Calling the police, letting them in. I thought about it the whole time I was running. Thought maybe I should just break it up myself, bring you inside, let it go. Jamal turned slightly, facing him. Why didn't you? Robert exhaled. Because we tried that. We kept quiet. We avoided them. We let it go when they followed you, when they pushed, when they laughed in your face. And it didn't stop. They just came harder. I figured if I didn't call now, there'd be another time, and maybe next time it'd go worse. Jamal leaned back against the counter, crossing his arms over his chest slowly. Carefully. I was scared they'd twist it. Say Diesel attacked them. Say I started it. Make me the story instead of them. Robert nodded. I was scared of that too. The silence that followed wasn't cold. It was cautious, like both of them were watching the same storm on the horizon and knew it wasn't done yet. But, Robert said, sitting up straighter, they didn't get to run this time. We got the footage. We got it clean. Your voice, their fists, clear faces, they can lie, but it won't hold. Jamal looked at the phone on the table. Won't stop their parents from trying. Robert's mouth pulled into a thin line. No, it won't. And they will. The kind of people who raise boys like that, they don't apologize. They don't ask questions. They circle the wagons, call lawyers, start talking about defamation and character and boys being boys. They'll come after us, Jamal said quietly. Robert nodded, probably already making the calls. You saw how that officer paused when he looked at the names. Those boys come from families that don't like being told no. Jamal pushed away from the counter and sat across from his father. So, what do? We prepare, Robert said. We make sure everything's documented. We don't delete anything. We don't speak to anyone without witnesses. And we don't stop telling the truth, no matter who comes asking. Jamal rested his elbows on the table. You think the school's gonna back them? Robert tilted his head. I think the school's gonna try to stay quiet. They'll wait to see how loud this gets. If it stays local, they'll try to sweep it. If it spreads, they'll scramble to cover themselves. Jamal thought for a long moment, eyes drifting to the hallway, where his torn backpack still lay on the floor. I want people to see it, he said. They will, Robert answered. But on our terms, not through rumors or edited clips, or people trying to tell the story for us. When we speak, it's going to be clear, calm, and controlled. And if they come knocking, Robert looked him in the eye. Then we keep the camera rolling. Same way I did tonight. They want to fight. They're going to have to fight on the record. Jamal nodded slowly. It wasn't over. He knew that. The boys might have been taken away, but they'd be back. Not in the same way. Not with fists in the street. It would be court dates, accusations, pressure, maybe media, maybe worse. But this time, he wasn't walking into it alone. He looked down at his scraped knuckles, and then over at Diesel, who hadn't moved since the door closed behind the police. The dog's eyes met his, steady and patient. You think they'll try to come at him? Jamal asked. Say he was part of it? Robert's expression tightened. They'll try. But we got witnesses. We got footage. That dog didn't touch a soul. He just made sure no one else touched you. Jamal nodded again. It wasn't just about being safe anymore. It was about being ready. They'd drawn the line. And now, whatever came next, they'd meet it together. The letter arrived 3 days later, folded neatly, delivered by hand, not mail. A uniformed man, animal control, not police, stood at the door, his expression stiff and unreadable as he handed it over. Robert didn't open it right away. He stood on the porch for a moment, watching the truck drive off, the county logo stenciled across the door, then stepped inside and locked the door behind him. Jamal was sitting at the kitchen table with a plate of reheated pasta. But he didn't need to see the envelope to know what it was. He saw it in his father's jaw, in the way he held it like it burned. Robert sat down slowly, tore the seal, and read. Jamal waited. When Robert finally spoke, his voice was low and dry. They filed for a dangerous animal investigation. Want a formal hearing. Witness statements. Photos. They want Diesel evaluated. Jamal leaned forward, his stomach tightening. What does that mean? Robert looked up at him, his eyes steady. It means they're pushing for him to be declared a public threat. If they succeed, they'll move to have him put down. Jamal didn't say anything at first. He felt the words more than he heard them. They dropped like stones into his chest, everyone heavier than the last. He didn't even bite them, Jamal said finally, his voice brittle. They know that, Robert replied. This ain't about what he did. It's about what they can spin. The room felt smaller now, the air tighter. Diesel, stretched out near the front door, lifted his head slowly, sensing the shift. His eyes moved between them, calm but alert. They're scared, Jamal said. Not of the dog, of what the video shows. They want the story gone. They want the reminder gone. Robert folded the letter and set it on the table like he didn't want to hold it any longer. Griffin's dad's name is on it, he said, along with Wyatt's and Chad's. They hired an attorney out of Jacksonville, someone who specializes in liability defense. They're not just trying to win. They're trying to bury the whole thing under paperwork and doubt. Jamal's hands curled around the edge of the table. They want him gone, he said. To punish us. Robert nodded. They want the dog put down to make a point that we don't get to fight back. Jamal looked at Diesel now. Really looked. He thought about the way the dog had burst through the fence without hesitation. The way he hadn't bitten anyone, hadn't lost control, had simply stood between him and what was trying to hurt him. No training had taught that. It was loyalty, plain and true. And now they were calling it danger. "What do we do?" Jamal asked. Robert stood up, went to the drawer beside the fridge, and pulled out a folder thick with printed copies, screenshots, affidavits, timestamps, testimony. "We give them the truth," he said. "On paper, in court, wherever they want to hear it." He paused, then looked Jamal dead in the eye. "And if they don't want to hear it, we make it too loud to ignore." Jamal nodded slowly. "People already saw the video," he said. "Somebody posted it last night. I didn't share it, but someone did. It's everywhere now. Everyone's watching." Robert didn't look surprised. "Then they're gonna try to flip it faster. Paint you like a violent kid. Paint me like some angry father who trained his dog to attack." "Let them try," Jamal said. "We've got nothing to hide." Robert walked back to the table and placed his hand over the letter. "I'm going to file a counterstatement tomorrow," he said. "Testimony, video clips. We'll get our own evaluation, someone independent. If we sit back, they'll control the pace." Jamal's voice was quiet. "They don't want justice. They want the silence back." Robert nodded. "And they're gonna find out they can't buy that anymore." That night, Jamal sat on the back step with Diesel lying beside him, the air cool and thick with the smell of wet grass. He ran his hand slowly along the dog's back, feeling the steady rise and fall of each breath, the warmth beneath the fur, the calmness that hadn't wavered even when everything else had. "They're scared of you," he said softly. "That's how you know you did something right." Diesel shifted slightly, pressing closer. Jamal looked out across the yard toward the bent corner of the fence where the fight had started, the place where it had all changed. He wasn't angry, not the way he thought he'd be. He was tired, yes, frustrated, but what he felt most was clarity. They'd drawn the line, and now the other side was pushing back, not with fists, but with filings and threats and expensive suits. But it was still the same fear, still the same attempt to take something away because they couldn't control it. But this time, he wasn't standing alone, and they weren't backing down. The first donation came in before sunrise. $25. No name, just a message. For the dog. For your son. For the truth. By the time Jamal woke up and checked the link Robert's cousin had helped set up the night before, there were over 100 names. Some small amounts, some larger. 50, 75, one for 200, with a note that simply read, "Keep fighting." He stared at the numbers for a long time, scrolling through usernames he didn't know, cities he'd never been to, messages from people who'd never met him but had seen the video, people who had heard the story in fragments or watched it unfold second by second in grainy phone footage and still decided to stand beside him. When he walked into the kitchen, Robert already had the page pulled up on his laptop. 1,500 overnight, he said. Another 500 just this morning. There's messages coming in every few minutes. Jamal sat down slowly. They really saw it. They didn't just see it, Robert replied. They believed it. And that's more than I thought we'd ever get from strangers. Diesel padded into the room, head low, ears relaxed. Jamal reached out and scratched behind one, and the dog leaned into it without hesitation. Robert turned the laptop slightly, showing the messages lining the screen. People are angry. Not just about what happened to you, about the fact that they tried to punish him for stopping it. Jamal read a few aloud. This dog is a hero. This is why people record everything. Fight them all the way. Some of the names had blue check marks next to them. A few were teachers. A local vet offered to do a free behavior evaluation. A lawyer from Tallahassee volunteered to help file the response paperwork. I sent the first batch in this morning, Robert said. Legal statement, counter to the dangerous animal petition, full footage. 3 signed witness letters from neighbors who saw the fight, and the eval request. Jamal nodded slowly. You think it's enough? We'll find out soon, Robert said. But we're not waiting quiet anymore. That's done. That evening, the school tried to make a statement. A press release was posted to their homepage, 3 paragraphs of vague concern about violence, a promise to investigate, and a claim that they were working with all parties involved. It didn't land the way they hoped. By noon the next day, the comments section was locked. Too many people had already seen the footage. They didn't want neutrality. They wanted names. They wanted answers. And they weren't letting the story fade. By the time the county hearing arrived 2 days later, the courtroom was full. Half the people there weren't involved in the case. Some had driven in from other towns. Some wore shirts with Diesel's face on them. One woman held up a hand-painted sign that read, "Protect the ones who protect us." The judge was polite, but visibly surprised by the turnout. The lawyer representing Griffin's father and the other families tried to argue fear, tried to stress the size of the dog, the chaos of the moment, but the video spoke louder than any of them. It showed everything. Diesel breaking through the fence. Diesel standing over Jamal. Diesel growling, but not lunging, not biting, not attacking, just placing himself between danger and the boy he belonged to. The vet testified next, a tall woman with gray hair and a calm voice who had met Diesel just the day before. "This is a stable dog," she said firmly. Confident, balanced, and controlled. No sign of aggression outside of what's appropriate under threat. Robert submitted the footage, the evaluation, the donations, and the public letters of support. The judge listened, watched, asked questions, and when the decision came, it was quiet. "This animal is not dangerous," the judge said. "This petition is denied." Jamal didn't cheer. Neither did Robert. They just looked at each other, nodded once, and let the air settle around them like something heavy had finally lifted. Outside the courthouse, people clapped quietly. Some offered hugs. Others took pictures with Diesel, who sat calmly beside Jamal on the courthouse steps, like he knew exactly what had happened. Reporters asked questions. They didn't answer most of them. Not because they were hiding, but because they knew the truth was already out there. That night, Jamal sat on the porch while Diesel rested at his feet. His ribs still hurt. His jaw was sore. But his chest felt clear for the first time in weeks. Robert came out with 2 glasses of cold water and sat down beside him. "We won this round," he said. Jamal nodded. "They'll try something else," Robert smiled. "They can try, but they won't get what they came for." The street was quiet again, but this time it wasn't because everyone was pretending. This time it was because they'd been heard. And Jamal, sitting in the place he'd once been attacked, looked out into the night and felt no fear, just readiness. By the end of the week, it wasn't just students who whispered in the hallways. It was teachers, too. Something had shifted permanently. Griffin, Wyatt, and Chad no longer walked like they owned the place. They moved smaller now, quieter, heads down, shoulders tighter. The stares they used to get were no longer rooted in respect or fear. They were laced with something colder, disgust. Rumors had always been part of the school's rhythm, passed around like gum or gossip. But now, they weren't rumors. They were facts. Everyone had seen the video. Some watched it in pieces. Some all the way through. Some paused it, frame by frame, just to catch the details. To see the way Jamal hit the ground. How Diesel stood guard. How Griffin's face crumpled when he realized they were being filmed. The silence that used to follow Jamal into the lunchroom had been replaced with quiet nods. Respect that didn't need words. No one sat with Griffin anymore. Wyatt's voice had lost its edge. Chad had stopped showing up half the time. Jamal noticed it all, but didn't react. He walked the same path through the building, carried the same bag, wore the same jacket, but now people stepped out of his way. Not from fear, but from recognition. The kind that came when you saw someone hold their ground and survive the fire. It was on a Thursday when the confrontation happened. Not planned, not dramatic, just quiet, natural, the way most turning points happen. He had stayed after school to finish an assignment in the library. The sun had already started slipping behind the trees by the time he stepped out onto the back walkway. The campus was almost empty. Just a few teachers packing up, janitors unlocking trash bins, and 3 figures leaning against the side wall by the gym. Griffin saw him first. He straightened as Jamal approached, but didn't move away. Wyatt shifted nervously at his side, eyes darting. Chad looked at the ground like he wanted to be anywhere else. Jamal didn't stop walking, not at first. But as he passed them, Griffin's voice cut into the silence. "You think you won, huh?" Jamal stopped. He didn't turn yet. He just let the question hang there for a moment. Then he turned to face them, his eyes steady, unreadable. "I didn't win anything," he said. "I just stopped losing." Griffin snorted, but there was no strength behind it. "You got people to cry for you, raise money, pretend you're some kind of victim." Jamal's jaw clenched, not from anger, but from the effort of staying calm. "I didn't ask for anything," he said. "People saw the truth and made up their own minds. That's what you hate. Not me, not the video. The fact that, for once, someone saw through your performance." Wyatt spoke up, voice sharp. "You think we deserve to lose everything? That fair to you?" Jamal stepped closer now. Not aggressive, just deliberate. "You didn't lose everything," he said. "You lost the lie you were hiding behind. The one where you were always the victim when things got loud. The one where boys like you could swing first and still play innocent later." Chad glanced up, his voice barely above a whisper. "They might expel us." Jamal didn't flinch. "You tried to leave scars on my face and thought no one would see. Now the truth's louder than your parents' names. You brought that on yourselves." Griffin's mouth opened, then closed again, and for a moment, none of them spoke. Then Jamal said, softer now, "You know what really scares you? That the dog didn't hurt you. That I didn't either. We let the world see what you did without needing to strike back harder. You made your choice in front of everybody. Now you live with it." He turned to leave, but paused at the edge of the path. "And the next time you think about laying hands on someone who hasn't done a thing to you, remember this: someone's always watching now." They didn't follow him, didn't say anything else. And as Jamal walked home, the quiet felt different than it ever had before. Not heavy, not empty, just clean. The letters came home the following week, hand-delivered again, this time by the school district itself. No more temporary suspensions. No more vague reassurances. This time, the language was final. Permanent removal. Multiple counts of aggravated assault. A pattern of targeted violence. Clear violation of the district's code of conduct. Griffin, Wyatt, Chad, expelled. No appeal. It had taken time, longer than it should have. But between the footage, the witness testimonies, the public pressure, and the school's own quiet scramble to save face, there was no path left to protect the boys without setting the whole building on fire. And nobody wanted to burn for them. Jamal didn't celebrate. He didn't speak about it in the halls. He just folded the notice into his backpack and carried it home like any other paper. At the dinner table, his father opened the envelope slowly, read it once, and nodded. "It's done," he said. On their end, anyway. But school was only part of it. The local sheriff's office had filed a report the same day as the attack. With the video as evidence, and multiple community witnesses backing it, charges moved forward. Nothing that would ruin them for life, but enough to matter. 3 counts of misdemeanor assault, 1 count of trespassing with intent to cause harm, mandatory community service, court-mandated counseling, probation. Griffin's father had tried to intervene early, tried to claim the attack was mutual combat. The video made a fool of him, so he pivoted to apology. But no one believed it. Not after the legal filings, not after the letter trying to have Diesel euthanized. The community saw through it. So did the judge. The boys were assigned to separate sites. Griffin to a sanitation crew working highway cleanup. Wyatt to a food pantry downtown. Chad to a warehouse run by the city's crisis outreach team. All 3 were banned from participating in any school-sanctioned events for the rest of the year. Sports, clubs, dances, everything. Jamal passed one of them once. Wyatt, walking with his head low, reflective vest shining under the sun, while he picked up trash with a clawed stick along the edge of the service road. Their eyes met for a second. Wyatt looked away first. At school, the noise didn't return. There were no new bullies. No one stepped up to replace them. Students kept their distance, not out of fear, but because Jamal had become something more than a target. He had become proof of what could happen when the lie got caught on camera, of what the truth looked like when it stood its ground. One teacher, Mr. Daniels, had quietly approached him after class. "Don't ever think people didn't notice," he said. "We did. Some of us just didn't know how to act when it mattered. But that won't happen again." Jamal nodded once, thanked him, and left it at that. There was still school to finish, still homework to turn in, still walks home, still Diesel waiting at the gate. But the air felt different now, lighter. Not because everything was perfect, but because the weight had shifted to the shoulders that had earned it. The fear was gone. The waiting was over. And slowly, life started to settle back into something close to normal. At the end of the month, Jamal and Robert took Diesel to the park just outside the county line. Not the small one near their neighborhood, the bigger one, with open fields and trails that curved through trees and wildflowers. They stayed for nearly an hour, walking slowly, watching Diesel stretch his legs and sniff at everything, his tail up, his steps confident. The sky was wide and open, blue without clouds, the wind soft but steady. On the way back to the car, Jamal stopped by one of the picnic benches and sat, letting the sunlight soak into his arms. "You think they learned anything?" he asked after a while. Robert stood beside him, hands in his jacket pockets. "I don't know," he said. "That part's not on us." Jamal looked down at Diesel, who had sprawled out at his feet, like he owned the whole park. "I just didn't want them to win." "They didn't," Robert said, "and they won't. It wasn't revenge. It never really had been. It was resolution, and that, Jamal finally understood, was enough. The porch creaked under Jamal's weight as he stepped outside, the screen door easing shut behind him with a soft clack. The evening air was warm but not heavy, and the light from the porch bulb pooled across the steps in a soft circle that reached just far enough to catch the edges of Diesel's ears. The dog was already there, stretched out across the top step like it belonged to him, head resting on his paws, tail thudding once as Jamal sat down beside him. Robert followed a moment later, 2 glasses of sweet tea in his hands, the ice still clinking gently as he passed one over. He didn't say anything at first, just sat down on the opposite end of the steps and looked out across the yard, the same way he had for years, like it was a habit that didn't need a reason anymore. It had been a long month. The hearing was over. The boys were gone. Diesel was safe. The school had issued a statement, a real one this time, naming the boys, apologizing to the community, pledging new guidelines and oversight. There were rumors about resignations. The principal was on leave. A few teachers who had stayed silent for too long were now suddenly finding their voices. None of that changed what had happened, but it mattered. It meant people had paid attention. Jamal took a sip from his glass, the tea sweet and cold as it settled against the back of his throat. Coach Gibbons asked if Diesel could come to the school, he said after a while. Robert looked over. "Why?" "Some therapy groups doing a thing for finals week. Stress relief. They wanted to bring in trained dogs, and someone on the board mentioned him. Said he calmed the whole block just by standing there." Robert smiled softly. "You thinking about it?" "I said I'd think about it," Jamal said. "He's not a prop. He's not for show." Robert nodded. "He's family." Jamal reached down and scratched Diesel's side. The dog shifted slightly, rolled over halfway, paws up like he didn't have a care in the world. "They keep calling him a hero," Jamal said. "There's posts all over the neighborhood page. Someone's talking about getting him a medal." Robert chuckled. "They should. Not every hero wears a uniform." "He just did what he knew," Jamal said. "He heard me. He came. That's all." "That's more than most people do," Robert replied. "A lot of folks saw something wrong for weeks and didn't move, didn't speak, Your dog jumped a fence and made a stand. He deserves every word they give him." Jamal looked out toward the street. Quiet now, still. The same sidewalk he'd walked every day. The same yard that once felt like it had been closing in on him. "Do you think it's really over?" he asked quietly. Robert was silent for a moment, then set his glass down beside him. "Over?" he echoed. "No. Things like this don't ever end clean. People move on. News cycles flip. But someone will remember. Someone will carry it. And someone else will face something similar, and not feel so alone when they do." Jamal nodded slowly. "But for us, Robert said, we get to exhale." They sat there for a long while, listening to the soft sounds of the neighborhood, the distant hum of a lawnmower down the block, a screen door slamming somewhere across the street, Diesel's tail tapping the wood now and again like he was dreaming. Jamal leaned back on his elbows and looked up at the stars beginning to push through the dusk. "People used to look right through me," he said, "like I was in the way. Now they want to shake my hand, ask questions, say sorry." Robert smiled. Let them apologize. Let them feel uncomfortable. That's how change starts." Jamal's voice lowered. "I don't want them to forget Diesel." "They won't," Robert said, "because you won't let them." They sat until the ice in their glasses melted, until the last of the light faded behind the trees, and the porch light was the only thing left drawing shadows across the steps. Jamal reached down again, rubbing Diesel's ears gently. "You heard me," he whispered. "That's all it took." Diesel stirred, rolled closer, rested his head on Jamal's knee. Robert stood, stretched, and held the screen door open. "You coming in?" "In a minute," Jamal said. Robert nodded and disappeared inside, the door clicking softly shut behind him. And Jamal sat there with Diesel in the quiet of the porch. Not to wait, not to guard, but simply to be. No more fear, no more wait. Just a boy and his dog under a sky that had stopped pressing down. And for the first time in a long time, everything felt exactly as it should. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please share it with your friends and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.